After a near-fatal dinner, rising chef Elise is Seoul's newest obsession, on the plate and off. Her meteoric rise at Modu collides with the dangerous orbit of Tae-hyun Kang. Can they resist the heat between them? Or will the city's darkest forces make the choice for them?
Intelligence gathering. The restaurant was dark beyond the frosted glass wall. It resembled a slumbering creature in hibernation. No hint of the chaos that had occurred within its walls the night before was visible. Yet Tae-hyun Kang tensed, his gaze narrowing as Park held open the back entrance door for him to walk through. There was a single shaft of light emanating from Kim Jackson's office door, beckoning him towards it. Tae-hyun Kang was determined to get answers and restructure his allegiances after his cousin's betrayal. The restaurant owner was his first of many stops. When Tae-hyun appeared in the doorway, Kim's eyes widened in panic as he reached for the gun lying out on his desk. His shoulders relaxed slightly, but he didn't lower the gun, still on alert as to the nature of the visit. "You picked a hell of a night to visit. I'm here to determine the scope of what transpired, not assign blame," Tae-hyun replied evenly. Kim's jaw tightened. He gestured to the chair before lowering the gun back down to the table, his entire body deflating like a popped balloon, the tension draining so completely that Tae-hyun imagined he could feel the shift in the room's pressure. "Sit, or don't. But understand this. I brought Elise here to cook, not to be bait in anyone's war." Park closed the door, shutting them in, and took a silent post just beside the door. Tae-hyun settled into the chair like a king taking a throne, his eyes sharp and focused. Tapping his laptop, Kim exhaled, turning his screen to face him. "I'm in the process of doing my own reconnaissance after tonight's debacle." Grainy footage rolled. Woo Jin leaving the kitchen with a covered plate. A blind spot. Then, Elise entered the frame seconds later, her gaze intent on the waiter's back. "We've got a dead angle in that hallway. It should have been fixed last month. That's on me," Kim confessed. "Woo Jin? Hired 10 days ago through a staffing agency. Paperwork was clean, too clean. My GM vetted him. I've suspended the GM until I know more." Park spoke for the first time, clipped and neutral. "The agency's reference line went dark 2 hours ago. Burner switch. We're tracing payment routes. Your waiter received a transfer from an account masquerading as legitimate." Kim's eyes narrowed. "It was a small transfer," Park continued. "Just enough not to draw attention. We'll peel it back." "If you're wondering whether my staff sold you out, the answer is no. Someone exploited a gap on the busiest night we've had in months. I put Elise on the pass because I needed a steady hand, and I trust her. Not to mention, she saved your life." "I'm aware," Tae-hyun answered, shifting in the chair. "Here's what happens next. You audit every new hire from the last 6 weeks, back in front of the house. Anyone pushed through the agency is benched until cleared. Change the private dining room service protocol. No dish goes down that hall unescorted. 2 signatures at the pass, acting head chef and floor supervisor. Add a body cam on the VIP runner if you have to." Kim folded his arms, thinking. "Done. I'll close the private rooms for a week and run staff drills. We'll fix the camera blind spot tomorrow." Park slid a slim folder onto the desk. "These are our recommended vendor verifications. We'll cross-check your distributors and delivery manifests." Quietly. Kim eyed the folder, then Park. "Quietly is important. My people aren't soldiers, they're cooks and servers. They need to feel safe, not surveilled." "Then keep them safe," Tae-hyun answered. "That includes Elise," Kim asked tentatively, as though testing the waters, before stepping fully into a sensitive conversation. Especially Elise. Kim held his stare for a moment, then nodded once, reassured by what he saw reflected in Tae-hyun's eyes. Good, because I didn't bring her halfway around the world to watch her get chewed up by ghosts from your family album. He reached past the laptop, picked up a small, weathered photo from the credenza, and set it between them. Tae-hyun picked up the picture and gazed at the memory frozen in time. 2 narrow New Orleans porches, a Korean grandmother watering plants. A little girl in braids is offering a paper cup of water. A brown-skinned, thin little boy with curly hair and softly tilted eyes framed by high cheekbones. That's my Halmione, Kim explained. The house next door, Elise's. She was baking boxed cakes when we were kids. Burned half of them. Kept trying anyway. Before I left the States, I told her if she ever wanted something different to call me. 6 months ago she did. Crying. Said she needed to get out of New Orleans. Out of a life that stopped loving her back. Kim's voice softened, then steadied. She found her fiancé cheating on her with her best friend. Tae-hyun's grip on the photo tightened slightly as he set it back on Kim's desk. Did she know? Before she caught them, did she suspect or did it blindside her? I got the sense that she was the last to know. Tae-hyun absorbed this silently, his own memories flickering, of betrayal, of the way one moment could redraw every line in a person's life. He understood the impulse to run, even as it left a trail of everything unsaid burning in its wake. Park's phone buzzed. He glanced down, then lifted his eyes. The agency principal for the staffing firm left on a one-way flight. Manila. Kim let out a low, humorless breath. Of course. Tae-hyun angled toward Kim again. 2 offers. First, I place discreet security here as consultants. They answer to you on the floor and to Park off it. Their job is deterrence and protocol, not intimidation. And second? A direct line. If you see anything, anyone, out of place, you call us before you call anyone else. We'll keep Modu clean. And Elise safer, once I tie up a few loose ends. Kim weighed it, his jaw flexing. Sounds like a plan. I don't want her chased by shadows while she tries to plait scallops. Then let us remove the shadows. Fine, we do this together. My people, your people. But hear me, Chairman. If any of your men strong-arm my staff, they're gone. If this place turns into a fortress, I shut it down myself. Agreed. The 2 men exchanged a handshake, grip even. Park slid a business card across the desk. Blank front, a single number embossed. This rings me. 24 hours, the lieutenant said. Kim tucked the card into his wallet. Kim. The restaurant owner looked up. Thank you for bringing her here. Kim's answer was simple, unadorned. Take care of her. She's like a sister to me. Tae-hyun held his gaze a moment, then nodded once, and stepped out. Park followed, the door clicking shut behind them. Routines and fault lines. The days blurred at the edges, softening into a routine Elise never expected, but began to settle into all the same. Each morning started the same way, barefoot on the cool marble floors, the quiet thump of her workout echoing through the penthouse as Seoul woke far below. When she finished, breath steady, she would find Soo-jin waiting with a steaming cup of tea and the same sweet, grandmotherly smile. Their conversations drifted between Korean idioms, childhood memories, and gentle gossip about the building's wealthy residents. It becomes a kindness Elise didn't know she needed. The penthouse remained a gilded fishbowl, beautiful, high above everything, yet undeniably confining. But rather than letting the walls close in, Elise chose to fill them with purpose. The kitchen became her domain. With its gleaming appliances, imported cookware, and pristine countertops, it was a chef's dream, and she treated it like one. Recipes she once scribbled into notebooks suddenly came alive. She perfected sauces, baked pastries she'd never had time to try, and experimented with combinations Soo-jin insists were too Western, only to smile proudly when she loved them anyway. Soo-jin became her right hand. If Elise mentioned an ingredient, it appeared the next morning without fail. Sometimes after Soo-jin braved 3 markets to find just the right variety. Their kitchen dance became so natural that Elise forgot sometimes that she was still a guest in someone else's world. And always, woven unpredictably through her new rhythm, was Tae-hyun. He was the staccato beat punctuating her days, present in a flash of footsteps, gone before she could blink. A shadow crossing her periphery, a ghost of cologne and danger trailing behind him. Most nights, he returned in the ink-black hours before dawn. She never heard him come in, but she knew he had been there. Because the dish she would leave out for him, no matter how late, was always empty by morning. Every last bite. One evening, Elise looked up in surprise from the sauce she was preparing when the front door opened, and in walked Tae-hyun, early for once. He looked like he'd just finished carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. His eyes showed the lack of sleep, and the midnight meetings were taking their toll. Park, his second in command, walked beside him, the two deep in conversation. Park froze when he saw her staring, but Elise looked away quickly, pretending to be engrossed in brushing the garlic butter sauce onto the French bread in front of her. Tae-hyun gave his lieutenant a few final instructions before he turned on his heels to leave his back stiff. Elise sensed that her presence disturbed the man. She ignored her misgivings and instead pasted a smile on her face as she poured a glass of red wine and offered Tae-hyun a tray of stuffed mushrooms. A smile crept onto his weary face at her olive branch. "Crab and truffle-stuffed mushroom," Elise announced proudly. "Lump crab meat, mascarpone cheese, and fresh thyme, drizzled with an aged balsamic vinegar reduction." Tae-hyun accepted the proffered mushroom and popped it in his mouth with a low moan of satisfaction that made her pulse quicken. "You like it?" "It's really good." He took the glass of wine from her, and she relaxed as he took a tentative sip, then drained the glass. "It seems like you've had a long day, but I've got just the remedy. You can help me finish cooking." Tae-hyun threw up his hands in protest. "I don't know how to cook. The soup I made a few nights ago is the extent of my culinary skills." "Good," Elise grinned, arching an eyebrow. "You can learn a little something then." "But I have to work." "I've watched you do nothing but work all week. I'm not taking no for an answer." Grabbing his hand, she led him into the kitchen and stationed him at the island after he washed his hands. The moment felt almost unreal to her. This man who commanded rooms with a single look now standing in her space, sleeves rolled, knife in hand. The scent of garlic and jazz floating around them like some strange, comforting spell. Tae-hyun studied the cutting board as if it were a classified document. Elise couldn't help the soft laugh that escaped her. "You're overthinking it," she teased gently. "It's just vegetables, not a hostile negotiation." His eyes flicked up, dark, tired, but carrying a glint of something warmer. "Says the chef," he murmured, but his hands began to move anyway, imitating the motion she demonstrated. Slow at first, tense, then steadier. Jazz hummed through the speakers, mellow notes curling around them. The penthouse, which so often felt like a fortress, softened into something intimate, almost peaceful. "Lemon brown butter, spaghetti," Tae-hyun repeated under his breath, the corners of his mouth lifting faintly as he worked. Sounds complicated. It's not. Elise pulled a skillet from the rack and tossed in a slice of butter, which sizzled. It's like life. He raised a brow. Meaning? Meaning. She glanced at him over her shoulder, cheeks warming. If you trust the process, everything comes together. He huffed, a soft, incredulous sound that might have been a laugh. It transformed his whole face, smoothing out the hard lines exhaustion had carved there. Elise felt something tug in her chest at the sight. He wiped the back of his wrist across his brow, turning back to the cutting board. You really believe that? I have to, she said simply. Otherwise, I'd spend every day wondering how I ended up here. His hands paused. The unsaid things hung thick between them. Danger, captivity, the strange, fragile bond forming where it shouldn't. Then Tae-hyun pushed out a slow breath, almost a surrender. Then I'll trust the process, he murmured, going back to chopping. For tonight. Elise swallowed, her heart fluttering at the quiet admission. She smiled, turning back to the stove just as the butter turned golden and fragrant. Well, she said softly, then tonight is already off to a very good start. Sujin appeared in the doorway like a soft breeze, quiet, unobtrusive, but impossible to miss. Elise didn't notice her at first. She was too focused on the skillet in front of her, on the way Tae-hyun was carefully, so carefully, trying to mimic her chopping rhythm. The jazz hummed low. Butter sizzled. Something warm and fragile threaded itself between them. Sujin watched for a moment, hands folded in front of her apron, eyes narrowing with the kind of knowing only age and experience can grant. There they were, two people who should have never occupied the same orbit, yet somehow did, pulled together again and again by something neither was ready to name. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but carried easily through the kitchen. I'm heading home now. Both Elise and Tae-hyun glanced up, startled out of their small bubble. Elise offered a smile. Tae-hyun nodded respectfully. Sujin's gaze lingered on them, on their shared cutting board, on the way their shoulders brushed when Elise reached for the oregano, on the faint, softened lines around Tae-hyun's eyes that weren't there an hour ago. She caught Elise's eye and gave her a tiny, meaningful smile, fond, approving, maybe even a little amused. Good night, dears, she said softly. And with that, she slipped out of the penthouse, the front door clicking shut behind her, leaving Elise and Tae-hyun alone in the warm, fragrant glow of the kitchen. The air between them suddenly felt charged in a whole new way. The wine glowed like a ruby in their glasses. The low lights cast everything in a soft amber wash. The table between them felt smaller than usual, warmer, more human. No longer just another piece of expensive furniture in a penthouse too big for its own silence. Elise twirled her fork, gathering a perfect swirl of spaghetti, the lemon-bright aroma rising to meet her. The first bite melted on her tongue. Creamy burrata, the crisp salt of prosciutto, rosemary coaxing everything together. A low, involuntary sound escaped her. Then, without warning, a slurp. A loud one. Her eyes widened. Heat floods her cheeks. Oh God, sorry, she started, hand flying up to cover her mouth. But Tae-hyun laughed. Not a dry huff. Not the faint curve of his mouth she'd seen once or twice. A real laugh. It broke out of him unexpectedly, warm and bright, pulling the tension from his shoulders like a hand unwinding a knot. He pressed a palm briefly to his forehead, shaking his head with a smile that could stop traffic on the streets below. Elise stared at him, then began laughing too, unable to help herself. The sound felt like something cracking open inside her, lightness she didn't know she'd been starving for. "I don't usually eat like a feral raccoon," she said between chuckles. "I swear." Tae-hyun smirked, lifting his wine. "It's fine. I was beginning to wonder if you actually enjoyed your own cooking. Spaghetti was our struggle meal growing up. You could make a lot of it, eat until you were stuffed, and still have leftovers for days. Maybe that's why this upscale version is one of my favorite recipes." "I admire your passion for food," Tae-hyun said before taking a sip of wine. "Where I'm from, food is magic. It's history, memory, art that you can experience with all your senses. Even the ingredients you use can tell a story." "Really? What story does this dish tell?" "Well," Elise hesitated, then reached across the table with the spoon. Tae-hyun didn't look away as she lifted a small scoop of sauce from his plate. When she brought it toward him, he leaned in just enough to accept the bite. His gaze darkened, not with heat, but with an intent focus that sent a light shiver down her spine. She cleared her throat softly. "This dish tells a story about beginnings." His brows lifted slightly. "It's simple," she continued, voice warming with confidence. "Just lemon, butter, herbs, and pasta. On paper, it's nothing. But when you bring them together the right way," she gestured to his plate, "it becomes something comforting, something bright, something that feels like home, even if you haven't had one in a while." Tae-hyun watched her, unmoving. "It's a reminder," Elise added quietly, "that even humble ingredients can become something beautiful when they're given time, care, attention, a beat. Kind of like people." The tension shifted, softened, deepened, but stayed safely in the air between them. Tae-hyun set his fork down with deliberate calm, his eyes fixed on her. "I see," he murmured. "So this dish isn't just about flavor." "No," she replied. "It's about hope and choosing to build something better out of whatever life gives you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The jazz hummed low. The city glowed outside like a living constellation. And Tae-hyun's voice, when it finally came, was quiet but impossibly sincere. "Then it's one of the most honest things I've ever tasted." The moment unfolded in a breath, soft, tentative, and charged with everything they'd both been swallowing down for days. Elise rose from her chair without fully realizing she had moved. Tae-hyun pushed back from the table slowly, inviting her into his space. His eyes darkened with a hunger that had nothing to do with the dish cooling on the table. Their eyes locked onto each other, the low hum of jazz wrapping them in a cocoon as Elise sat down, her legs straddling his lap. His hand slid up the smoothness of her thigh, then paused its sojourn, his gaze flicking briefly to her lips, before returning to her eyes with a question he doesn't voice. Elise answered it for him. She leaned in first, just enough for her lips to brush his. Featherlight, testing, tender in a way that stole her breath. Tae-hyun inhaled sharply as if the softness of it caught him off guard. Then he moved. His hand came up to cradle her jaw, warm and steady, guiding her gently closer. The next kiss wasn't tentative, but deeper, surer, a quiet intensity that built like a slow tide rising. His other hand found the small of her back, pulling her fully into his orbit. Elise's fingers curled into the front of his shirt, instinctively seeking something solid. He responded to the touch with a low exhale, the kiss shifting. Still respectful, still controlled, but undeniably more urgent, more real. It was as if all the unspoken tension between them, every lingering glance, every quiet night, every moment they'd pretended not to notice each other, finally had somewhere to go. The world outside disappeared, The kitchen, the danger, the secrets, all faded into the background. For a few breathless seconds, it was just them. A tender beginning that spiraled, naturally and inevitably, into something that felt a little like gravity and a little like surrender. The kiss deepened, slow at first, then, with a pull neither of them had the strength to resist. Elise's fingers curled into his shirt, Tae-hyun's hand warm at her waist. The world narrowed to the press of his lips and the soft thrum of jazz. For a fleeting moment, there was no danger, no cousin hunting them, no syndicate politics, just them, suspended in something fragile and new. Then, a sharp, insistent buzz sliced the air, once, twice. A third time, urgent. Tae-hyun stiffened. The vibration rattled against the table, breaking the spell so abruptly that Elise's breath caught in her throat. His forehead rested against hers for a single heartbeat, his jaw tight, eyes closed, as if he was pleading silently for one moment more. But the phone kept up its insistent, angry buzz. Reality slammed back in. He pulled away, controlled but reluctant, reaching for the device. Elise rose from his lap, arms curling around herself, as the warmth between them evaporated into chill air. "Tae-hyun," she whispered. He doesn't answer. His expression darkened the moment he saw the caller ID a Park. He swiped to accept. "Yeah." A pause. His shoulders locked. "When?" Another pause, longer, heavier. "Fine, I'll handle it." He ended the call with a firm tap, tension climbing his spine like a drawn bow. Elise tried to mask the hurt pressing against her ribs, but she knew he saw it, just not what it meant. "Is everything—" "It's nothing you need to worry about." His voice was clipped, already half somewhere else. The distance stung more than she expected. She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Oh, okay, I should let you work." Elise, her name was soft, regretful, but she was already retreating, arms around herself, gaze on the floor, as she backed toward the hallway. "It's fine," she managed, forcing a small smile. "Really. Good night, Tae-hyun." Before he could stop her, she slipped into her bedroom and closed the door with a quiet click, shutting him out, shutting herself in. Hours later, the apartment was quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the low rumble of men's voices drifting through the hallway. Elise lay perfectly still on the bed, heart thudding. Her bedroom door cracked just a sliver, enough for sound to slip through. In the living room, Park stood before Tae-hyun, shoulders tense, hands clasped behind his back in a posture of formal respect. The first gray hints of dawn pressed faintly at the windows, casting both men in a muted bluish haze. "Boss," Park began. His voice kept low. "Dae-sung has been temporarily neutralized." Tae-hyun didn't turn from the window, but his jaw tightened. "Explain." All of his accounts, frozen. Every route he used to funnel cash or manpower has been blocked. Woo Jin has been handled, as well as those with dubious allegiances. The men you placed, your inside contacts, they've cut him off completely. He's isolated. A muscle in Tae-hyun's cheek twitched. "Good." Park hesitated, a brief, cautious breath. "But," he continued, "I have reason to believe he's working with the Black Serpents." Tae-hyun whipped around at that, eyes narrowing sharply. "Morago," he swore harshly, the words slicing through the air. "Gumisin nam." Another curse followed, low and lethal. I should have known he'd crawl to them. Park remained still, but the tension in him was unmistakable. "The council knows," he said quietly. "They're expecting your next move." For a long moment, Tae-hyun said nothing. His gaze drifted toward the hallway, toward Elise's closed door, though he seemed unaware he was doing it. Then he exhaled sharply and squared his shoulders. Keep the pressure on him? No access to money, no access to men, no route back into Seoul. Move our watchers closer, especially near the docks. And Park. Yes, boss. If the serpents make a move, I want to know before the council does. They'll try to use this to box me in. Park nodded once. Understood. But he didn't leave. Instead, he shifted his weight, lingering in place. Tae-hyun noticed. "Speak freely," Tae-hyun said. Park hesitated. A long, heavy silence stretched between them, as if he were weighing not the risk of his words, but the consequences of saying them aloud. "Boss," he began slowly, "the men are concerned." Tae-hyun's expression cooled. "About what?" "Elise." From the bedroom, Elise held her breath. She pressed a hand over her mouth to silence herself. Park continued carefully. "The timing, the circumstances, they're worried she may become a liability, that you're dividing your attention." Another beat. "And with Dae-sung making alliances with the serpents, they fear being distracted could be fatal. For you and for all of us." Tae-hyun said nothing, but the room sharpened around his silence. Park glanced toward the hallway. Not enough to see her, but enough for the gesture to feel invasive. Elise's pulse hammered in her throat. "And," Park added quietly, "some are questioning why you've shown mercy to your cousin. That's not your way, not before." He took a measured breath. "They're asking if your judgment is compromised." Another beat of silence followed. Longer this time, heavier. The kind that carried years of history, violence, and buried loyalty. Elise waited, breath shallow, heart pounding. Tae-hyun finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "What I do with Dae-sung is my decision, not theirs, not yours." Park bowed his head slightly. "Understood. But they're worried, Hyung-nim. They've followed you because you were always decisive, clear, unwavering." His voice dropped even lower. "They're afraid Elise changes that." Elise froze. Tae-hyun's reply was quiet, but lethal. "Anyone who doubts my judgment can say it to my face." Park didn't flinch. "They won't. They respect you too much." Tae-hyun stepped closer, voice dropping to a near whisper. "Then remember this, Park. I will handle Dae-sung. I will handle the council, and I will handle Elise." A pause, slow and deliberate. "No one touches her. No one questions why she's here. Not again." Park nodded once, formal, obedient, but there was a flicker in his eyes that suggested he knew the storm this would cause. "Yes, boss." The two men continued speaking, their voices dropping even lower, but Elise didn't hear the rest. She backed away from the door, pulse racing, her mind spiraling. She inched back into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. She squeezed her eyes shut, but the ache in her chest only grew. Because for the first time, she realized she wasn't just a guest in Tae-hyun's world. She was becoming a fracture in it. Back to life. The next morning, the air between them felt different the moment Elise stepped into the kitchen. Stiff, guarded, as if the easy warmth of last night had been wrapped carefully, tightly, and placed back behind glass. Tae-hyun stood at the counter, coffee in hand, posture straight but not tense. He looked composed, too composed, like a man who'd spent the entire morning rebuilding every wall she'd seen crack open the night before. Gone was the softness of yesterday's undone collar and bare feet on marble. Today, he was immaculate even in leisure, tailored charcoal lounge trousers falling in a clean line over the sharp planes of his hips. A fitted white Henley stretched smoothly across his muscular chest, 2 buttons left open in deliberate restraint. The faint edge of ink disappeared beneath the fabric at his collarbone, a secret half hidden again. A slim silver watch circled his wrist as if he expected the day to demand something of him. He looked like the kind of man who could step from this sunlit penthouse straight into a boardroom in Gangnam District without changing a single thing. Only the way his fingers tightened, almost imperceptibly, around the porcelain cup betrayed him. He glanced up as she padded in, bare legs, oversized white t-shirt brushing her thighs, hair sleep soft. Something flickered in his expression. His gaze dragged up her body slowly, unhurried. A flash of longing raw enough to make her breath hitch. But then it was gone, wiped clean, hidden behind the familiar mask. "Morning," he said, voice low, unreadable. She forced a small smile, moving to pour herself a cup of coffee. The silence stretched thin between them, her pulse loud in her ears. She gripped the mug with both hands, grounding herself. This was it. Her moment. She swallowed, then steadied herself. "I think it's time for me to get back to work. At Modu." Tae-hyun didn't blink. "And back to my life," she finished, lifting her chin. She waited for the argument, the refusal, the command she'd braced for. Instead, he set his cup down with deliberate calm and reached into his pocket. "For once," he said, tone cool, "we agree." The words hit her harder than she expected. He produced a set of keys, sleek, modern, attached to a small fob engraved with a building logo she didn't recognize. He placed them on the counter between them. "I've arranged for a new apartment," he said. "Secure, private, off-grid." She stared at the keys, throat tight. "It will be safer than your old place, and Modu will be under my protection from now on." He continued smoothly, as if discussing a business acquisition. "You'll have a security detail, plain clothes, discreet. They'll shadow you until the threat is resolved." Elise's fingers tightened around her mug. "Oh," she managed, doing everything in her power to keep her voice steady. "That's good." He watched her carefully, expression unreadable again. So unreadable it made last night feel like a dream she imagined. "I'll have Park take you there," he said simply. Of course he will, Park, the lieutenant who questioned her very presence. "Right." She nodded. "Okay. Thank you." A beat of silence. Long enough for disappointment to rise, unfurl, settle like a weight on her chest. She'd expected a fight. Instead, he let her go so easily it felt like a push. Tae-hyun lifted his cup again, taking a slow sip. The only sign he wasn't as untouched as he pretended was the faint tension in his jaw, the way his eyes lingered on her a second too long. "Elise," he said finally, voice level, "you'll be safe there." She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course," she whispers. "I'll be fine." Another beat. Another wall, another silence neither of them knew how to fill. Then Tae-hyun nodded once, crisp and controlled. "Park will be here in 10 minutes." She turned away before he could see the hurt she couldn't entirely hide. "Right," she said softly. "I'll get dressed." As she walked back to her room, The coffee in her hand trembled just slightly, and she could feel his gaze on her back the whole way, lingering like a touch he refused to give. Soo-jin was surprised to find Tae-hyun present so late in the morning when she entered the penthouse apartment. He was staring out of the floor-to-ceiling windows, one arm pressed against the glass, as though staring out of a prison cell. She set the bag of vegetables and herbs she'd collected from the market, alongside the list she'd carried. "Are you feeling okay, Aga?" Soo-jin probed. "Where is Elise?" The mention of Elise's name stirred Tae-hyun from the window. He turned to face her, the pain raw on his face. "I sent her away." "Aga." Soo-jin sighed, the word thick with quiet reprimand and deeper understanding. "Come." She patted the stool at the bar. "I'll make some tea." He obeyed without argument, lowering himself onto the stool like a chastened boy rather than the man who commanded empires. They did not speak as the kettle warmed, and the scent of steeping leaves unfurled into the room. They had long ago learned that silence between them was not emptiness, but comfort, woven from years of shared meals, quiet griefs, and unspoken loyalties. It was the kind of silence that only existed between two people who had already said everything that truly mattered. "She was good for you," Soo-jin said. She set the steaming cup of tea down on the counter in front of him. "She reminds you that you're human, Aga." The petite, silver-haired housekeeper covered his hands with her own. "When I saw the two of you together, you reminded me of your parents, before—" Tae-hyun's expression looked haunted, as specters rose with the steam from his cup. He took another sip, swallowed, stared. "What if I break her heart, like my father's darkness broke Iyama?" The question hung heavier than the boiled air in the kitchen, a sorrowful undertow that threatened to drag them both beneath its surface. For a second it seemed as if he might say more, might empty out the entire graveyard of his childhood memories, the half-heard arguments behind closed doors, the choking silence that followed, the way his mother would sometimes sit at the table for hours, staring at nothing. Instead, he fixed his eyes on the tea, as if seeking answers in the swirling flecks of green. Soo-jin remained quiet, letting him spill out the poison. She wiped her hands on a linen towel, then rested her elbows on the marble countertop, the pose almost conspiratorial. "She isn't your mother," Soo-jin said gently, her tone a careful balance of tenderness and steel. Tae-hyun pressed his thumb against the rim of the cup, focusing on the bite of the heat. She could leave, because of me." He didn't mention the way Elise's smile had flickered out this morning, or how her voice grew more brittle each time she said, "thank you," to him. He didn't have to. Soo-jin saw it all, the way only someone who'd raised him could. Soo-jin cocked her head, examining him as if he were a stubborn weed in her garden. "But what if she is the light? The love of your life?" Tae-hyun scoffed, but it was a brittle sound, quickly dying out. "What if the darkness is stronger?" Soo-jin smiled, her wrinkles deepening. "Then you marry her anyway, and you let her rearrange your furniture, and you let her eat the last dumpling, and you listen when she tells you to wear a scarf because it's cold, and you say sorry when you're wrong." She slid the mug closer to him, her small hand patting his like an exclamation point. "Your father never learned that part," she said. "But you did, Aga. You learned." He looked up, eyes glassy, a boy again. "She's not afraid of you, Tae-hyun," Soo-jin said, her voice so certain it felt like a shield. "Not really. Not the way your mother was afraid." He let out a long breath, tension draining from his shoulders. Soo-jin leaned in and whispered, "You are not your father." The words hit him full in the chest, and for a moment, Tae-hyun simply let himself sit there, absorbing it, tasting the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she was right. Back to reality. The drive to Modu felt unreal, like Elise was slipping back into a life paused mid-breath. The closer they got, the more the city hummed around her, vibrant and alive in a way the quiet, fortress-like penthouse never could be. By the time Park pulled up to the curb, a cool breeze through the cracked window lifted her hair, grounding her with scents of garlic, chili, and Seoul's endless motion. She murmured a clipped thank you and stepped out. Tae-hyun's men spread themselves out with practiced ease, taking up invisible positions along the street. She spotted 3 of them almost immediately, one pretending to check his phone, another leaning casually against a lamppost, a third strolling toward the corner. Plainclothes or not, they stood out once she knew what to look for. But she decided, fiercely, stubbornly, to pretend she didn't see them. Out of sight, out of mind, out of my life. Or so she told herself. With her shoulders squared and chin lifted, Elise pushed through the sleek glass doors of Modu. Inside, the restaurant was already alive with rhythm, knives chopping on cutting boards, pans hissing as oil hits heat, servers weaving between tables in crisp black uniforms. Laughter rose from a booth near the kitchen. A line cook shouted for more gochujang paste over the clatter of dishes. The air smelled of sesame, garlic, and simmering broth, comfort and chaos intertwined. But the moment Elise stepped inside, the energy changed. Heads turned, voices dipped. Whispers rippled through the staff like a breeze skimming water. Is that her? She finally came back. Careful, the Voodoo Queen is back. Voodoo Queen. The nickname hit her like a slap, sharp, humiliating. A reference to New Orleans, to stereotypes, to fear. A warped joke twisting around her throat. Her spine wobbled for a heartbeat. Then she forced herself upright. She was not going to break. Not here. Before the whispers could pull her under, someone clapped a hand gently on her shoulder. Elise. She turned to see Kim watching her with warm, steady eyes. His tall frame and easy smile made him hard to intimidate. You made it back, he said softly. Yeah, she breathed, trying to sound brave. Guess I did. His smile widened, gentler this time. Ignore them. People talk, especially when they're bored. Or scared, she murmured. Kim's brow lifted with sympathy. You didn't hurt anyone. They'll forget their little nickname soon enough. Will they? Elise asked, her chest tightening. Of course, he said firmly. Because you're going to cook. And when they taste what you make, they'll remember exactly why I brought you here in the first place. She tried for a smile, and it actually stuck this time. Thanks, Kim. He nodded toward the kitchen. Go on. Let's get you back where you belong. Elise took a breath. Another. And with her chin lifted high once more, she stepped into the kitchen, determined to reclaim her place, rebuild her life, and leave Tae-hyun Kang firmly behind her. Or at least, that's what she tells herself. Weeks later, time moved differently now. No longer a blur of fear and confinement, but a steady rhythm of cooking, learning, and reclaiming her confidence. As the weeks flew by, Elise's talent began to show in everything she touched. Her sauces became local legends. Her fusion dishes, rooted in Southern comfort, elevated with Korean freshness, had regulars begging for the recipe. Her plating was art. Her flavors were home. And Modu changed with her. Under Elise's influence, the menu evolved. Lighter, more vibrant, more daring. Seoul's food bloggers took notice. Influencers tagged Modu on their feeds with slow-motion pours and close-ups of glistening glazes. Reservation calls stacked into the night. The calendar filling weeks in advance. Kim started fielding inquiries from event planners and hotel concierges. And even the kitchen staff stood a little taller during lineup. Elise's station, once the quiet corner where the new chef learned the flow, became the engine of the room. By day, Elise was focus incarnate, sharp, warm, unflappable. She kept a smile ready for the servers who hovered at the pass, a calm nod for the line cooks, still learning her measurements by instinct. She coaxed flavor instead of forcing it, taught by doing, and never let her voice rise above the music of the kitchen. When guests asked to compliment the chef, she wiped her hands, stepped out with humility, and spoke about ingredients as if they were old friends she was always happy to introduce. But the lightness she wore in the dining room stayed there. At night, when she returned to her apartment, keys soft in the lock, shoes pushed neatly by the door, the quiet greeted her like a familiar ache. She would lean against the counter for a moment, let the hum of the refrigerator fill the space where conversation should be, and set aside the mask she'd adopted for the world. The stillness welcomed what she'd hidden all day, the slow seep of loneliness, the offbeat pulse of something missing. She was too tired to name. She'd catch herself staring at the city from her window, watching headlights braid across bridges and neon badge the edges of buildings, and chuckle mirthlessly at the thought that she could coax depth from a stockpot, balance heat and acid with the flick of a wrist. Yet when it came to matters of the heart, she was all thumbs. Her talent in the kitchen was an orchestra. Her love life, a metronome ticking in an empty room. There wasn't much time to dwell. Habit saved her from the spiral. She turned on the shower and stepped beneath the steam, letting the water beat away the clang of pans and the relentless press of orders. Heat loosened the muscles strung tight across her shoulders, eased the day from her skin, softened the thoughts that knotted when she stood still too long. By the time she padded out in a cotton robe, hair damp and curling at her collarbone, exhaustion had returned like a tide. She brewed a cup of ginger tea out of muscle memory, left it half-finished on the nightstand, and slid beneath cool sheets with the city's dim glow painting the ceiling. Tomorrow's prep list lined up neatly in her mind. The loneliness dimmed at the edges. Sleep tugged her under. And in the space between waking and drifting, Elise let herself believe, just for a breath, that the life she was building could be enough. A star is born. Kim Jackson hosted his quarterly staff dinner, long tables pushed together, wine flowing, laughter thick in the air. The entire Modu team gathered to taste new dishes and celebrate another successful season, but tonight felt different. Near the end of the meal, Kim stood, glass raised, clearing his throat. The chatter died instantly. Every face turned toward him. He smiled, wide, proud. "I want everyone to know," he began, "that every single dish we ate tonight was created by Elise." The staff erupted into applause. Elise, seated toward the middle, nearly sank into her chair, cheeks burning. She ducked her head, embarrassed by the spotlight. Kim continued, his voice ringing with emotion. "Because of Elise's incredible talent and because of this team's outstanding service, I'm proud to announce that Modu has officially earned a Michelin star." Gasps. Cheers. A few people even teared up. Elise's eyes grew moist, her breath catching as the weight of the announcement sank in. Her journey, Louisiana, heartbreak, danger, captivity, suddenly felt like steps leading her right here to this moment, to this found family. Kim lifted his glass higher. To the staff, to Modu, and especially to Elise. Glasses clinked. Wine glowed. Elise's tears spilled over, but they were the good kind. For the first time in months, she felt like she belonged. The noise of the dining room had faded to a soft, distant hush. In here, the air felt like memory. Warm lamplight over old menus, a wall of gleaming chef's knives, and framed photos that told the story of a life built plate by plate. One, on the corner of the desk, showed a narrow New Orleans shotgun house with a Korean grandmother watering ferns. Next door, a girl with braids grinned, flower on her cheek. "Elise," Kim said gently, "I meant every word tonight." She blinked hard, the shine in her eyes catching the light. "I know." "You've changed this restaurant," he went on, voice thick with pride. "Because of you, our profile has exploded. People want to know who you are. They want your dishes and your story." He reached for a folder, then paused, his gaze drifting to the photo. A slow smile tugged at his mouth. "Can you believe this?" he asked, tilting the frame toward her. "St. Claude Avenue, Halmione yelling at me for tracking mud through the kitchen." Elise laughed, an easy, unguarded sound that loosened something in the room. "And me sneaking sugar from her pantry. She caught me every time." "Every time," Kim echoed, shaking his head. "You burned box mix cakes like it was a sport. Then you'd start again like nothing happened." "I was determined," she said mock prim. "You were stubborn," he corrected, grinning. "And talented. Even then." He set the photo down, softer now. "Did you ever think we'd end up here, you, the star of a Michelin-starred kitchen in Seoul? Me, trying to pretend I'm not crying in my own office." Elise's smile wobbled. "I used to fall asleep to the sound of your grandmother chopping scallions. I thought if I listened long enough, I'd learn the secret." "You did," Kim said. "You learned to keep going." The moment stretched, warm with shared history. Then he flipped open the folder. "And with the Michelin star came inquiries." "Inquiries?" Elise repeated, half dreading, half delighted. Kim's grin returned, bright and boyish. "From Seoul's elite, business leaders, even government officials. Everyone wants you for their events." She pressed a hand to her chest. "Kim, there's one in particular," he said, sliding a printed brief across the desk. "The Cultural Advancement Gala. The gala of the year, socialites, diplomats, people who can change your career overnight." He met her eyes. "They want you to co-design the menu and attend." Elise gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Are you serious?" "Very." He leaned back, savoring the moment. "So, what do you say? Are you ready?" Her smile could have lit the skyline. "Yes, absolutely." Kim exhaled a quiet laugh of relief and pride, then let the folder close. The business glow faded into something gentler. "How are you really doing?" he asked. She hesitated, only a heartbeat, then lifted a shoulder. "Busy helps." "Busy isn't the same as okay," he said, not unkindly. "I know." She looked down at her hands. "I'm getting there." He nodded, accepting the honest middle. "Any word from back home?" He kept his tone neutral, but the name sat between them anyway. She shook her head. "No." His mouth thinned. "Asshole," he muttered. "He was never good enough for you." Elise huffed a small, rueful breath. "Took me a minute to catch up to that." "You caught up," he said. "That's what matters." He was quiet for a beat, then chose his words with care. "And here, you've got people who look out for you, me, the team, even—" He let it hang, the rest of the sentence unspoken. Her gaze flickered, then slid off. "I'm focused on the kitchen," she said lightly. "On the gala. On what's ahead." Kim studied her, saw the evasion, respected it. He lifted his hands in surrender. "Okay, future, it is." She smiled, grateful. "Here's what happens next," he said, shifting back to business with a warmth that never left his voice. "We'll block a week to build the gala menu. You lead, pick the anchors. I'll help with the logistics. I'll loop in suppliers for anything seasonal or stubborn. We'll run a tasting with a tight crew." He paused. "And I'll handle the noise, the press, the curiosity." Elise's shoulders softened. "You've always handled the noise." "That's my job," he said. "Yours is the music." She laughed again, brighter this time. He stood, and so did she. For a moment, neither moved. Then Kim stepped around the desk and pulled her into a hug, carefully, like he was hugging the kid next door and the chef she'd become at once. "I'm proud of you, Lisa," he murmured. "Thank you," she said into his shoulder, voice thick. They parted. He tapped the folder. "We start tomorrow. Don't be late. The ministry loves punctuality almost as much as they love a good headline." She rolled her eyes. "Yes, chef." He smirked. "That's more like it." At the door, she paused. "Kim." "Yeah?" "Thanks for everything. For answering the phone. For this." She lifted the brief, then her chin. "For believing when I didn't. He didn't say you did the same for me. He didn't have to." It was there, in the photo on the desk, in the way he watched her go, with the quiet certainty that some bonds from home don't just survive distance. They become the bridge to what comes next. Park drove her home in silence, usually stoic, tonight slightly puzzled by the bright, almost buzzing energy radiating from the back seat. Elise stared out the window, grinning into the night. When they finally pulled up to her building, she unbuckled quickly. "Park," she said, turning toward him. "You don't have to pick me up and drop me off anymore." Park stiffened. "Miss Elise, that's not for you to decide." She shook her head, firm for the first time in a long time. "No, I'm making my own way from now on. No more shadowing. No more escorting. I'm done being babysat." Park's jaw flexed. "Boss asked us to—" "And I'm telling you," Elise interrupted, "I don't need it." She opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. "Good night, Park," she said gently. Before he could argue, she closed the door. Park watched her walk into the building, lips pressed into a grim line. His hand instinctively lifted toward his phone, ready to call Tae-hyun, ready to inform him. But he stopped. A long breath. A decision. Instead of dialing Tae-hyun, he chose another number. "This is Park," he said quietly. "Cut the detail on Elise Thibodeau, boss's orders." He hung up before he could change his mind. And in the silence of his car, Park wondered, for the first time, if he'd just made a mistake, or protected his boss from a truth he isn't ready to face. Sleepless in Seoul. The elevator doors slid open in silence. Tae-hyun and Park stepped into the penthouse, the city's glow bleeding in through the glass like a distant pulse. Park's knuckles were raw. Tae-hyun's shirt sleeves were rolled, a dark edge at his collar where someone else's blood had dried. They'd found the last one of the quiet men, the kind who never spoke out of turn. black serpent money in his pocket. Dae-sung's shadow on his phone. The beatdown had been clinical, but there'd been something else under it tonight. Rage that had nothing to do with the man on the floor and everything to do with the emptiness waiting at home. Tae-hyun crossed the threshold and stopped, expecting the faint whisper of garlic or scallion, the memory of heat on the stove, and a covered plate waiting with a note in a careful hand. Nothing. The kitchen was all surgical shine and stainless steel. The knife block lined up like soldiers. The stovetop as pristine as a showroom. No steam, no note, no hum of a woman absently singing a tune she never quite finished. The apartment, which only weeks ago had felt improbably alive. Tea in porcelain cups, laughter suppressed into a smile, the soft percussion of a wooden spoon tapping a pan, had hardened back into what it had always been, a mausoleum of cold marble and glass. Park said something. "The men are waiting downstairs for your word." And Tae-hyun moved on instinct to the window, where the Han River cut its black ribbon through the lights. The city was a living thing beneath him. He felt none of it. "Let them wait," he said without turning. Park paused. "Yes, boss." A beat of stillness. Park took one look at his profile, too still, too sharp, and bowed himself out. The elevator swallowed him. Alone again, Tae-hyun stood. He knew he should sleep. He knew the pressure behind his eyes wasn't going to ease on its own. But the bed had started to feel like the coldest place in the world. He lasted 20 seconds before turning from the window, grabbing his keys, and heading for the door. The Maybach curled through the sleeping parts of Seoul, past shuttered storefronts and pools of neon, the river flashing between buildings like a promise he didn't believe in. He wasn't driving to any one place. He was driving to keep from stopping. He passed Modu without meaning to, then slowed without admitting it. A light burned in the back. He signaled, pulled to the curb, and killed the engine. Inside, the dining room was set for tomorrow. Polished glassware, folded napkins like origami against shadow. A glow seeped from the kitchen pass. He followed it. Kim stood at the stove with his jacket draped over a chair, sleeves rolled, reheating something in a low pan. He glanced up, took in the suit, the sleepless eyes, the drawn mouth. "You look like shit," Kim said, not unkindly. "Your hospitality is improving," Tae-hyun replied. Kim snorted and shook the pan. "You eat, or you pass out on my floor. Those are the options." He plated without fuss, something Elise had taught the line to do her way. Rice with a sheen like pearls, a small cut of meat lacquered with a dark sheen, pickled greens bright against the brown. He slid it across the counter with a pair of chopsticks and reached for a bottle on the back shelf. "Brandy," he said. "Don't ask me for top shelf at 2:30 in the morning. Sit." Tae-hyun sat. The food was hot, clean. He realized halfway through the first bite that he hadn't tasted anything all day. Kim poured 2 short glasses and slid one over. They drank without clinking. "How's your side?" Kim asked after a beat. "Handled," Tae-hyun said. It was true in every way that counted and useless in all the ways that didn't. Kim nodded slowly. "Restaurant's good," he said, filling the space with something that asked and offered at once. "Better than good. Things are running smoother now. Tighter. We fixed the blind spots. Staff's confident. We're full every night, and still turning people away." He let that sit before he looked up and met Tae-hyun's eyes. "I'm guessing you want to know how Elise is doing." Tae-hyun didn't answer. He didn't have to. The question had walked in with him. Kim's expression softened in a way that had nothing to do with surrender and everything to do with knowing someone's history from before they learned to hide it. "She's at her peak," he said. The line moves to her rhythm. Dishes are cleaner, bolder. She's got the room in her hand. A curve touched Tae-hyun's mouth and was gone. Pride was a dangerous thing when it didn't belong to something you could control. Kim hesitated, then added, "Michelin made it official." He watched the flicker across Tae-hyun's face and allowed himself a small smile. "You knew she had it, now everyone else does too." Tae-hyun nodded once. "She earned it." Kim took a sip of brandy, set the glass down. "You know how pain works," he said quietly. "Sometimes it makes us sharper, busier. It keeps us moving so we don't have to sit alone with the thing that hurts. She's cooking like her life depends on it." Tae-hyun didn't ask if that was a warning. He didn't ask if that was a judgment. He stared at the edge of the plate, the way the sauce caught the light, and said, "Keep her kitchen safe." Kim's answer was already waiting. "Always." They finished the food. The brandy lingered in the back of the throat, the way truth does when you don't speak it. At the door, Kim clasped his shoulder. One brief press, the language of men who didn't hug. "Get some sleep," he said. "You're no good to anyone like this." Tae-hyun didn't argue. He stepped back into the night, the air cooler now, the city humming differently. He didn't head home. 2 streets over from Elise's building, he parked in the dark and turned the engine off. From here, he could see the corner of her floor through a gap in the trees. One window's curtain stirred in the AC draft. No silhouette, no movement. Good. She should be asleep. He told himself again that leaving her alone was love. That distance was safety. That a fortress built far from her would keep shrapnel from hitting what he couldn't stand to lose. The lie sat in the passenger seat like an old friend he couldn't shake. He stayed until the edge of the sky thinned to gray and the city yawned. Delivery trucks whispered down the block. A bicycle bell chimed. A vendor. Somewhere rolled up a gate. Light lifted in her window and then died again. A bathroom, maybe. A hand passing over a switch. He started the car. By the time the elevator opened on his floor, dawn had broken over the Han. The apartment looked the same as he'd left it, immaculate, expensive, airless. He toed off his shoes and didn't look toward the kitchen this time. He didn't look at her door. In his room, he lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling until it blurred. Sleep found him not as mercy, but as a forced surrender. An hour stolen from a ledger that had been in the red for weeks. In the kitchen, the kettle sat cold on the stove, waiting for a hand that didn't live here anymore. In the living room, the city's morning light threw pale bands across the floor. In his chest, something that had learned to survive on control finally admitted it was starving. When he slept, he dreamed of a note in careful handwriting and the sound of a wooden spoon against a pan. When he woke, the silence had settled again, heavy as a verdict.
Hungry for more? Part 3 turns up the heat. Bigger risks, deeper secrets, and a choice that could rewrite everything they fought for. If you thought the kiss, the star, and the gala were intense, wait until loyalty meets destiny. Subscribe now and be first at the table when Part 3 drops. One click. No spoilers. All chills.